Welcome back to this segment. And in this segment, we are going to talk about the next step in tools we want kids to have to battle their anxiety. And this step is called the A step, where we're going to learn to acknowledge our worries and then learn how to talk back to them. And remember, this kind of fits into a larger model. And what we've talked about, there are certain tools we want kids to have to help them better overcome their anxiety and not let it control them and get them to avoid, especially under the conditions they're going to see in schools, which are mostly psychological threats in nature. So this segment is going to focus on the A step. And again, why do we want to acknowledge? And it's such an important step that we miss. But let's go back to that running theme. Imagine I just threw a cobra into your office right now or wherever you're watching this video. And I said to you, don't listen, don't pay attention, don't mind the cobra. Just keep focusing on my presentation. How good of a job do you think you could do if there's a cobra swirling around at your feet and you're trying to focus on me? Not very good at all, because there's a cobra in the room. So remember that threat detector, trying to pretend it's not a threat, trying to think it's not there or will it out of existence, doesn't make it calm down. It makes it worry more about you. Why don't you get that there's a cobra in the room? So the first thing we need to do is learn to acknowledge our worries. Learn to hear them and make it safe to talk about them. And another way, this is where I throw out a Harry Potter reference. So in the books of Harry Potter, the evil bad guy, his name was Voldemort. But everyone was scared to acknowledge Voldemort because they thought by talking about him, it could bring him back. But two people said that that's actually the worst idea and that we must acknowledge him because that's how we can keep him human and learn to fight him. So if anyone knows their Harry Potter trivia, you might know those two people right now. Give you a second to think about it. For those that play along, it was Harry and Dumbledore. But they would not call him he who must not be named. They would call him Voldemort. And that's the same thing we want to do with anxiety. We don't want to keep it and make it this big, scary thing. We want to acknowledge that we have a worry brain. And so a great way, parents, to practice acknowledging worry brain is to go back to scenarios. Throw out a scenario. I'll give you one right now. Surprise, you have to sing the national anthem at the Broncos game. And it's going to be videoed and shown to all your friends. What's your worry brain telling you about that? What are the thoughts you're hearing? I can't sing. Is it just no? No way. Everyone's going to laugh at me. I don't know the words. I'm going to be sick. What is your worry brain telling you? We want to acknowledge that and say, I hear you, worry brain. And that's so important. I'll give you another scenario. Let's say I told you you had to eat a tongue sandwich right now. What's your worry brain telling you about that? No way. It's going to make me sick. I'm going to gag. I'm going to throw up. Those are your worry thoughts. And it becomes really important, and that's the first big step. After we've calmed ourselves, we know we're anxious, to listen to our worry brain, and it's going to go, phew, I feel heard. Then the next step is after we acknowledge our worry thoughts, we need to learn to attack them, to challenge them, to talk back to them. And in the same way that there's a bunch of ways to calm our body, there's also a bunch of ways to talk back to our worries. And so let's throw them out, you'll see, but they fall into, again, these 4 buckets. The first bucket is we can learn to give our anxiety perspective. Anxious brain loses perspective. It sees everything as a cobra about to strike. So one of the ways to give it perspective is to ask it on a life or death scale. If 10 is a real life or death scale, what is this thing that I'm about to do? What is that on a life or death scale? Asking that person out, taking that test. It might feel like a 10 when we scale, but on a life or death scale, taking a test is probably a 1 or a 2. So being able to go, hey, anxiety, this is a 1 or 2, you need to chill out. But one of the ways I love to give perspective to is to think about what I would call future me. How is future me gonna feel if I either take the test or don't take the test? How is future me gonna feel if I get the shot or don't get the shot? And one of the people I work with said it best, is that I'm always trying to do things that make things better for future me. Another kind of way to attack anxiety, anxiety makes all sorts of arguments with no evidence, with no proof. So what you can say to your anxious brain, where's your proof? My worry brain always tells me I'm gonna blow up on an airplane. And one of the things I can point to, where's your proof? Where's your evidence? How many times have I flown and you told me I was gonna blow up and it didn't happen? Another very powerful way to tackle and challenge anxiety is with our values. And what we can say to our anxiety, I call it mission in life, but there are some things more important than just the not feeling anxious. So for example, which is a real fear of mine, is flying. I say to myself, my value of seeing other countries, of seeing family, of having adventures, is more important than that hour or 5 hours or 10 hours of being anxious on an airplane. And so that's one of the things you can say, worry brain, my mission in life is to see the world. I'm not gonna let you stop me. My mission in life is to be in a relationship. So I know this, asking this person out might make me anxious, but I'm gonna do it because that's something I really want. And then the last one is anxiety is learning. And again, its goal is to try to get us to avoid. So the last thing we can do with anxiety is learn to call out its tricks. Learn to see what it's trying to do against us to get us to avoid. And when that thing works to get us to avoid, it might use or will use that trick again. If making your chest hurt got you to avoid going to school that day, anxiety is going to make your chest hurt the next day if it gets you to avoid. So that's one of the things I also share with kids, that if this trick works to get you to avoid now, you're going to see it later in the future unless you don't let that trick work. And there's a lot of things anxiety can mimic and do, but the one thing it can't mimic is a fever. So I say to kids who I'm dealing with who are really anxious, that's the one reason to not go to school. All the other things can be more anxiety related. So one of the things you can do is you learn to call out anxious tricks. So again, what we want to do overall, just to see, is have tools to talk back to our anxiety. If you have older kids, and there are others, and there'll be a list that you can access for more of these, but we want to have the ability to talk back. But to understand with little kids, it's not easy to do or to teach them all this. So with little kids, elementary school kids, I teach them more statements that kind of go into these buckets. So you can see those show up right now. Worry brain, you only see the bad that can happen. Let me tell you something good. That's another way to give anxiety perspective. Worry brain, where's your proof? A big value is you can see worry brain kind of like a bully. And you can say, worry brain, you're not going to bully me around. And then you can see worry brain your trick. Worry brain, I see you repeating yourself. And let's talk about some more of those tricks. So remember, anxiety's using tricks all the time, and here are some of its favorites that it uses on us a lot. The first one, I call it kicking the can down the road. It might not be an in-your-face, oh, I'm super anxious about this assignment or test. It might just say, oh, you'll get to it later. You'll do it after dinner. And what anxiety is banking on is that you'll just continue to kick the can down the road and avoid, but effectively, it's guiding you to avoid doing something that makes you anxious. The next one is deep down. It might use some version of a thought. Deep down, you know the truth. Deep down, you know you're not going to pass the test. Deep down, you know everyone hates this presentation. And it's going to use some form of argument. Another one it's really learned to do is to break you down by repetition. I call it the broken record. It's just going to keep repeating itself over and over. Another one it can really get us to do is just focus what I call a shiny object, something that you need to do in the moment. So again, let's say you have a big paper and it just says, oh, you should clean your house. That's the shiny object. Or, oh, watch a little video game. Or do that right now and you get caught up. And then a big one, remember, anxiety, we feel it a lot in our body. And once anxiety learns that if you feel it in your body and it gets you to avoid, it starts to weaponize your body. You don't feel comfortable, so therefore you leave the party. So then it keeps bringing that uncomfortable feeling. So what we want you to learn to do, one of the things you can do is learn to catch those tricks. And with littler kids, it's not something we do much, but little kids can learn to talk back to worry brain. So again, once we have learned to identify anxiety, we've learned to practice talking about it through scenarios, then we've learned tools to talk back. Then the next part is putting all these skills together, and that's called the hot seat. So the hot seat is this phenomenon where you learn to be your child's worry brain, and they have to learn to talk back to you. They have to practice that skill of what you want them to learn to do in their head, is learn how to talk back to their worries. And this can work with, I work with kids as young as 3 to 4 years old, where they can already learn to say, worry brain, you're not the boss of me. So let's practice this hot seat right now. And so I'm going to we'll throw out a scenario. Let's go back to the national anthem scenario. And I'm going to be your worry brain. And now I want you to go back and I want you to look at these tools and think about what you could say to me and have the last word in the debate. Okay? Oh, you cannot sing the national anthem. It's going to be a disaster. Everyone's going to laugh at you. What could you say back? No, really, don't do it. It's going to be horrible. You don't know all the words. What could you say? Really, it's going to be horrible. Don't do it. What could you say? And that's the hot seat, where we practice learning to talk back to anxiety. And remember, this is a skill, and your kid is probably not going to be great at it in the beginning. And so if they miss one or they get stuck or stumped, which happens, say, oh, that worked. Worry brain had a good one there. Let's think together, what could we say back to that? Here's what I might say. Do you think that would work for you? So those are the things you want to practice, is learning to talk back to worries. And this is a skill that's really helpful and very empowering to kids to recognize their worry brain and learn how to talk back. So in your role as a teacher or parent, here's what we want you to be able to do with the A step. First, we want you to learn to help identify worry thoughts and help kids put it into that category. That can be statements like, that sounds like your worry brain. Oh, those sound like worry thoughts to me. you know what we need to do. And again, learn to help them identify it, and then help them learn ways to talk back to their worry brain. And you can say things and practice with that by doing the hot seat and getting them to get comfortable as a teacher as well, how to talk back to worries, and to get really good in that conversation in their own head. And another thing you can do as a parent to help is model that. To say, I hear my worry brain. This is what my worry brain's telling me. This is what I'm saying back to it right now, to not have it stop me doing those challenges. And so again, to kind of put in context, this is a key set of skills that we want kids to have as they learn to battle their anxiety and not let it control them. And so the first set of skills more focused on our emotions and being aware, and these are practical tools to help fight off the thoughts that come with anxiety. And then we'll talk next time about practical things that help us avoid avoidance and things that help us charge ahead and do, which is the next step.